In this chapter, you will continue to learn further about the law of demand. Remember, the law of demand says that as the price of a product rises, the quantity demanded will go down. In the last chapter, we explored elasticity, which measured our sensitivity to those price changes. In this chapter, we will learn about utility, which discusses our satisfaction with those goods and services that we consume, and how our levels of satisfaction are an important part of the decisions that we make and our decisions to purchase goods and services. So this is something that you should have in the back of your mind as you make your decisions. I guarantee you businesses have a very clear understanding of why we buy the things that we purchase. But oftentimes consumers, in the back of their minds, they have some level of understanding of their level of satisfaction. So essentially our main goal as consumers is, how do I allocate my scarce resources to make me as happy as possible? That's really what we strive to do, is to allocate our scarce resources to maximize our level of satisfaction. Now, it's important for you to understand this does not necessarily mean that everybody is just greedy and self-centered. Oftentimes, maximizing our level of satisfaction may mean that we actually have to give up something that helps somebody else out, but by helping out somebody else, we get some level of satisfaction by doing that. So for example, I may choose to purchase a generic brand of cereal when my kids come to visit, simply because I'm cheap, I'm frugal. But I also know that my kids really like certain kinds of things. And so I'll actually, when they come to visit, I'll buy the good stuff. My wife often will say, yeah, the kids are coming to visit, so our grocery bill is rising. Has nothing to do with what I want, but knowing that I make them feel good does something for me also. So we tend to want to maximize our level of satisfaction. And if we think about it, we don't want to make choices that make us worse off. We want to make choices that make us better off. So economists have come up with this idea, what's called utility. Utility is essentially a measure of our level of satisfaction from consuming a good or a service. It's not something that you'll ever see written down on a price tag. The idea ought to be there, however, when you make your decisions about your purchases. And the one thing that we've recognized is that we do, on some level, have a pretty good understanding of what gives us satisfaction. So oftentimes when I teach this concept in class, I will come to class with a bag of Hershey Kisses. And I'll ask students, who are my chocolate lover students that really enjoy chocolate? And I'll start to throw out one or two Hershey Kisses around the classroom. I usually find the one or two students that really like chocolate, and I'll keep tossing a Hershey Kiss back over there and tossing another Hershey Kiss to the other side of the room. And usually there's some that they're chocolate lovers, and I'll just keep feeding them these Hershey Kisses one at a time, in order to illustrate this idea of what's called marginal utility. Marginal utility refers to our incremental changes in satisfaction. So remember, that word marginal means incremental change. So as I consume one more unit of the good, I have a different level of satisfaction from that particular unit that I consume. And we recognize that for most goods, our marginal utility will go down the more that we consume of a good. So again, getting back to the chocolate example, usually when I start tossing out the first couple of Hershey Kisses, people are very excited. They're very happy. They have this much satisfaction. But then eventually, when I keep passing out more and more, They start to say, oh, I'm good now, I'm done. Every now and then I have a real chocoholic, and one semester I gave them about a half a bag of Hershey Kisses, one at a time. But every additional Hershey Kiss that I gave that student, it took them a little bit longer to eat it. They were getting less and less and less satisfaction from every additional Hershey Kiss. Think of another example. Think of if you've ever watched the same movie more than one time. Maybe the first time you saw the movie, you said, wow, that was amazing. That was a great movie. Loved it. Maybe the second time you saw that movie, it might have even been better because now you knew the plot line and the storyline and you knew what to expect. But then you watch it the third time, and then the fourth time, and then the fifth time. By the time you watch it the 20th time, you do not get the same level of satisfaction as when you watched it the first time. So typically, if you think of the law of demand, for us to consume more and more and more of something, the price has to come down, because as we consume more and more and more of something, it gives us less and less and less satisfaction. So that's one reason that we have that downward sloping demand curve, is simply this understanding that consuming more of a good or service on the margin gives us less and less satisfaction. So I'm not willing to pay as much for it. So let's look at how we make some of our choices. Let's imagine that I have $8.50 and I am going to decide to purchase a hamburger and soda, and I can purchase different amounts. And so you'll notice in looking at this graph or this chart, if I consume 0 hamburgers, I get no satisfaction. TU stands for total utility. My total utility is 0. But when I consume my first hamburger, I'm happy. I get 11 units of satisfaction from my first hamburger. But notice when I consume my first soda, I'm even happier. I get 19 units of satisfaction from my first soda. Maybe I'm thirsty. I'm really not hungry. So I get even more satisfaction from my first soda than I do my first hamburger. Now notice, if I were to go ahead and consume the second hamburger is going to only add 10 more units of satisfaction, not as much as the first hamburger, and it's going to add even less satisfaction. So if you think about it, my first hamburger, my marginal utility was 11 units. I went from 0 to 11. By adding another hamburger, I'm going to add 10 more units of satisfaction. So my total level of satisfaction is now 21. I got 11 from the first and 10 from the second. Now, again, remember, these are just made up numbers. These are not numbers that you're going to see like printed on a price tag or anything like that. But the concept, definitely, you should be able to see that the more you consume of something, the less utility you get from each additional unit. So you notice, if I were to have 3 hamburgers, I'd have 30 units of satisfaction. Like, yeah, this is great. Love this place. I get 3 hamburgers. But remember, you only eat hamburgers one at a time. The first one gave you 11 units of satisfaction. The second one gave you 10 units of satisfaction. And the third one only gave you 9 units of satisfaction. Eventually, you're getting less and less satisfaction the more hamburgers you consume. Now go ahead and think about the total utility and marginal utility of sodas. Again, as I consume my first soda, my marginal utility goes from 0 to 19. My first soda gave me 19 units of satisfaction. My second soda gave me less satisfaction, 14 units of satisfaction. So total utility of 2 sodas is 19, plus 17, which is 36. My third soda gave me 14. So I went from 36, add 14 to that, and you get 50 units of satisfaction from 3 sodas. My fourth soda only gave me 6 more units of satisfaction. So I go from 50 to 56 units. So you'll notice that as you consume more hamburgers and soda, that your marginal utility goes down. Now, it's also important for you to recognize prices are different, and the price makes a difference. And you'll also recognize you have a limited amount of money to spend. So I need to figure out what combination of hamburgers and sodas will maximize my level of satisfaction, recognizing the prices are different, as well as the limitation on income. So for example, I consume my first hamburger and get 11 units of satisfaction, but it cost me $1.50. I consumed my first soda and I got 19 units of satisfaction and it only cost me $1. So really what I want to do is compare dollar for dollar. How much satisfaction am I getting when I consume more of these products? So essentially what I want to calculate is the marginal utility to price ratio for each of these goods. How much marginal utility do I get relative to the price of that good? So take those marginal utilities and divide it by its prices, and then determine the point where those two ratios are equal to each other and you can afford. So if I take 11, the marginal utility of the first hamburger, and divide it by $1.50, price of the hamburger, I get 7.33 units of satisfaction for every dollar from that first hamburger. The second hamburger gave me an additional 10 units of satisfaction, but it cost me $1.50. So 10 divided by $1.50 is 6.67. 9 divided by $1.50 is 6, and on down the list. You'll notice sodas are $1, so when you take marginal utility and divide by $1, it's still the same number. So essentially what you have to think about is, where do I maximize my level of satisfaction from consuming hamburgers and sodas? It's going to come from that combination where my marginal utility to price ratios are equal and I can afford it. So you'll notice when I consume 3 hamburgers and 4 sodas, I get 6 units of satisfaction for every dollar that I spend. I get a total of 86 units of satisfaction from 3 hamburgers and 4 sodas. So 30 from the hamburgers, 56 from the sodas. I'll get a total level of satisfaction of 86 units. And I can afford it, $8.50. Now, you'll also notice that I could consume 5 of each and have 4 units of satisfaction for every dollar, equal to each other. But I can't afford 5 units of each. So you have to find that point at which your marginal utility to price ratios are equal to each other and that you can afford. So as another example, we have cookies and pretzels. Same, I made the math a little bit similar. Cookies are $1.50, pretzels are $1. I challenge you just to pause the video, try to figure out, if I have an income of $4, how many cookies and how many pretzels will I consume in order to maximize my level of satisfaction? So again, you have to complete your total utility and marginal utility columns. You'll notice that marginal utility declines the more cookies and pretzels you consume. Every additional cookie gives you less and less satisfaction. Now notice in this case, if I go from 4 cookies to 5 cookies, I'm no happier with 5 than I was with 4. My 5th cookie did nothing for me. My 6th cookie actually takes away my level of satisfaction. Maybe I got sick. I shouldn't have eaten the 6th cookie. I'm no longer as happy as I was with 4 cookies. I should have just stopped there. Okay? So then you have to calculate your marginal utility to price ratios and find that combination at which your marginal utility to price ratios are equal to each other. So again, you will take your marginal utilities and divide it by prices. So 25 divided by $1.50 is 16.67. 15 divided by $1.50 is 10. and you find that combination that is going to maximize your utility, is where those ratios are equal to each other and you can afford them. So look in a little bit more detail about this example. I go to the store and I have cookies and pretzels. I like both of them. I really do. I go to the store and I say my first cookie gives me 16.67 units of satisfaction for every dollar, but my first pretzel only gives me 10. I better just go with the cookie because I get more satisfaction for every dollar. And I say, well, let me go to 2 cookies, get 10 units of satisfaction. Well, that's the same as my first pretzel also. And I ask myself, hey, can I afford 2 cookies and a pretzel? And I actually can. That adds up to my $4. Notice if I go further and consume 3 cookies, I'm not going to be able to purchase as many pretzels as I was because of my limited income. And now all of a sudden my level of satisfaction goes down. So in this case, I'm going to consume 2 cookies and 1 pretzel. That adds up to my $4. It gives me a total level of satisfaction of 50 units. 40 from the 2 cookies, 10 from my pretzel. That gives me 50 units of satisfaction. There is no other combination that I can afford that's going to give me more satisfaction than 2 cookies and a pretzel. So there's 2 things that are going on behind the scenes as we look at our choices. One is called the income effect. We recognize that as prices change, essentially our purchasing power changes. So if prices are rising, we're not able to buy as much of that good as we once were. And so our purchasing power changes. So we might have to change our level of income if we really wanted to purchase 2 cookies and a pretzel, but the prices were more expensive. We might need to get more income. There's also this thing called a substitution effect. Essentially, prices are fluctuating and changing relative to the prices of comparable goods. So when I go to the store and I see cookies and pretzels, and I say, oh, cookies cost $1.50 and pretzels cost $1. If the price of a cookie rises to $2, that now means it's twice as expensive as the pretzels were. So relative to each other, I might then make some choices to consume more pretzels than cookies because cookies are now twice as expensive relative to the pretzels. So let's think about this in real life. Again, you're not going to necessarily go to the store and look for the number of utils of satisfaction you get from every item. But in the back of your mind, you ought to be thinking about these. So let's say that I've purchased some bagels and coffee this past week. I'm not telling you how many I'm purchasing, but the last bagel I consumed gave me 40 units of satisfaction, and it was a $2 bagel. The last coffee that I drank gave me 60 units of satisfaction, and it cost me $1.50. So with my decision this week, how did I do? Did I maximize my level of satisfaction? Did I maximize my utility? Again, the first thing you should look at is the marginal utility to price ratios, and you'll recognize they are not equal to each other. 40 divided by 2 does not equal 60 divided by 150. 40 divided by 2 is 20. I got 20 units of satisfaction for every, that last bagel gave me 20 units of satisfaction for every dollar I spent on bagels. Coffee, 60 divided by $1.50 gives me 40 units of satisfaction for every dollar I spent on coffee. So 20 doesn't equal 40. So I did not maximize my level of satisfaction. Think about what this means. Essentially, I should have consumed more coffee and less bagels. If I consume more coffee, the marginal utility of another cup of coffee is going to be less than 40. If I consume less bagels, the marginal utility of consuming one fewer bagel is going to be greater than 40. So eventually they would balance each other, equal each other out. If I were to consume more coffee and less bagels, I would somewhere in between there find an opportunity where my marginal utility to price ratios are equal to each other. So at the end of the week, I might have said, wow, I had bagels and coffee, but the coffee was really good. I probably should have just consumed more of the coffee. The bagels, they didn't do as much for me relative to the $2 price. I probably didn't need as many bagels as I had consumed. So if I'm really wise, I'm going to make my decisions next week based on this experience. And I'm going to think about which does better for me, coffee or bagels. So if you think about this, in summary, we recognize that utility measures our level of satisfaction with consuming our goods and services. And our marginal utility is going to decline the more and more we consume of something. And as we make our choices, we look at our purchasing power, we look at making our decisions subject to a limitation on our income, and we also look at prices relative to each other. So we try to find that combination of goods where the marginal utility to price ratios are equal to each other. I sort of wonder that as a person ages, they might get a better understanding of getting to that point where they make decisions that get to the marginal utility to price ratios are equal to each other. I've often encountered younger people that maybe they don't quite get as much experience with buying coffee and bagels, for example. And the more they do that, the more they begin to realize, how much satisfaction do I get from coffee and bagels? So in making our choices, we really need to examine our level of satisfaction. We also have to recognize that our behaviors change when prices change. That's elasticity. And those two concepts help us to gain a better understanding of the law of demand.